The Riverside High School parking lot buzzed with graduation excitement, but Maya Chen felt ice in her veins. She stared at her brother, Jake's shoulder blade, as he hugged their parents, that strange black serpent tattoo visible beneath his tank top, the same exact tattoo she'd seen on the news just hours before. Marcus Reaper Rodriguez, leader of the Devil's Disciples Motorcycle Club, was arrested today for murder, the reporter had said. The camera zoomed in on Rodriguez's massive frame as police dragged him away. That serpent tattoo, coiled and menacing, branded on his neck. Maya's mind raced. Her straight-A, scholarship-winning brother couldn't possibly be connected to the most feared Hell's Angel in California. Jake was heading to Stanford in the fall. He coached Little League baseball. He made their mom laugh with terrible dad jokes. But identical tattoos don't lie. As her family celebrated, Maya felt the foundation of her world cracking. Who was Jake really? What had he done to earn that mark? And why did everyone at graduation keep their distance when he walked by, their eyes filled with something that looked suspiciously like fear? Maya! Her mother's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Come take pictures with your brother. She forced a smile and joined the group, positioning herself strategically to get another look at the tattoo. Up close, the detail was unmistakable, a serpent eating its own tail with small skull markings along its body. The ink looked fresh, maybe 6 months old at most. When did you get that? She whispered to Jake as their parents fussed with the camera. His entire body tensed. For a split second, his easygoing demeanor cracked, revealing something harder underneath, something dangerous. Get what? He said, but his voice had changed. Colder. The tattoo. Maya kept her tone light, casual. I didn't know you were into that stuff. Jake's laugh sounded forced. Just wanted something to commemorate senior year. No big deal, but everything about his body language screamed it was a very big deal indeed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of congratulations and small talk, but Maya couldn't focus on anything except watching Jake. Really watching him. How had she never noticed the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, how his hand always stayed near his phone, ready to grab it at a moment's notice, how several classmates actually crossed the parking lot to avoid walking near him. During the drive home, Maya sat in the back seat while her parents chatted about college preparations and summer plans. Jake stared out the passenger window, silent. In the side mirror, she caught him watching her, his dark eyes unreadable. That evening, Maya retreated to her bedroom and pulled up every news article she could find about Marcus Rodriguez and the Devil's Disciples. What she discovered made her stomach clench with dread. The motorcycle club wasn't just any gang. They were the most ruthless criminal organization on the West Coast. Drug trafficking, weapons dealing, murder for hire. And the serpent tattoo wasn't just decoration. According to one article, it marked full membership in the club's inner circle, the kind of membership that required proving yourself through violence. She stared at a photo of Rodriguez's arrest, studying the tattoo on his neck. The similarities to Jake's were undeniable, down to the smallest detail. But this had to be some kind of mistake, some horrible coincidence. Around midnight, Maya crept downstairs for water and froze at the sound of Jake's voice drifting from the kitchen. He was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. Told you I'm out. The deal's done. His voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. I kept my end. Don't call this number again. Maya pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. Because I'm done with that life, Jake continued. I'm going to college. I'm getting out. A long pause. Yeah, I know what happens to people who try to leave, but I'm not just people. Another pause. Then Jake's voice turned deadly quiet. Tell Rodriguez that if he comes after my family, he'll find out exactly why they call me Ghost. Ghost. Maya's blood turned to ice water. She'd heard that name in one of the articles, a mysterious enforcer for the Devil's Disciples who'd never been identified or caught, someone responsible for eliminating the club's enemies with surgical precision, someone who'd simply vanished 6 months ago. The timing clicked into place with horrible clarity. Jake's tattoo, his changed behavior, his sudden urgency about leaving for college early, the scholarship to Stanford that seemed too good to be true for someone with Jake's grades. Maya backed away from the kitchen, her mind reeling. Her beloved big brother, the person she trusted most in the world, was a killer, a criminal, a ghost in more ways than one. And tomorrow she'd have to sit across from him at breakfast and pretend she didn't know the truth. The question that terrified her most wasn't what Jake had done to earn that tattoo. It was what he might do to keep his secret safe. The chrome of Razor's Harley gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the gas station as Sarah replayed their conversation in her mind. She'd been so excited to finally connect with someone who understood motorcycle culture, someone who might help her understand Danny better. Now, watching the leather-clad figure disappear into the night, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every set of headlights in her rearview mirror made her pulse quicken, though she couldn't quite explain why. Razor had seemed friendly enough, even charming in a dangerous sort of way, but something about how his demeanor shifted when she mentioned the scorpion tattoo nagged at her. Their house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest two-story colonial that had housed 3 generations of McKennas. The porch light cast long shadows across the front yard, and Sarah noticed Danny's motorcycle wasn't in the driveway. Again. He'd been coming home later and later these past few months, always with some excuse about work or hanging out with friends she'd never met. Inside, the familiar sounds of evening television drifted from the living room where her parents sat, wrapped in their respective routines. Her mother looked up from her crossword puzzle as Sarah entered. "How was work, honey?" Linda McKenna's voice carried the practiced warmth of a woman who'd perfected the art of checking in without prying. "Fine, just the usual crowd." Sarah hesitated, then added, "Mom, what do you know about Danny's tattoos?" Her father's newspaper rustled as he lowered it slightly. Tom McKenna's weathered face appeared over the sports section, his expression mildly curious. "What about them?" "The scorpion one, on his shoulder blade." "When did he get it?" Linda and Tom exchanged a glance that lasted just a fraction too long. It was the kind of look parents give each other when they're deciding how much truth their child can handle. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," Linda said carefully. "You know how your brother is about explaining his choices. Why do you ask?" Sarah shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curious. Met someone tonight who was into motorcycle stuff. Got me thinking about Danny's whole scene." The newspaper snapped back up, effectively ending Tom's participation in the conversation, but Sarah caught the tension in his shoulders. Her mother returned to her crossword with renewed focus, though Sarah noticed she hadn't filled in a single square since the conversation began. Upstairs in her room, Sarah found herself staring at the family photos on her dresser. There was Danny at his high school graduation, clean-cut and smiling, his arm around her shoulders. Another from last Christmas, where he looked different somehow, leaner, harder around the edges, with that tattoo just visible above his collar. When had her brother changed? It hadn't been sudden, she realized. It had been gradual, like watching someone's hair grow. You don't notice it day by day, but then suddenly you look up and everything is different. She pulled out her laptop and did something she'd never done before. She Googled her brother's name. Daniel Patrick McKenna brought up his old social media accounts, some work-related mentions from the auto shop, and a few high school news articles about the baseball team. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained the tension that seemed to follow him lately or the phone calls he took in hushed voices behind closed doors. On impulse, she searched for information about motorcycle tattoos, specifically scorpions. What she found made her stomach drop. Page after page of results linked scorpion tattoos to various motorcycle clubs, often indicating membership, rank, or specific achievements within the organization. Some of the clubs mentioned were clearly recreational groups, weekend riders who enjoyed the camaraderie and freedom of the road. Others were different entirely. The Hells Angels appeared frequently in her search results, along with warnings about their territorial nature and strict codes of conduct. She read about patch-over ceremonies, where smaller clubs were absorbed into larger ones, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. She learned about the significance of various symbols and the deadly serious nature of motorcycle club politics. By the time she heard Danny's bike rumble up the driveway, it was past midnight and her head was spinning with information she wasn't sure she wanted to possess. She crept to her bedroom window and watched her brother park his motorcycle and remove his helmet. Even in the dim light, she could see he was looking around carefully before approaching the house, scanning the street like someone expecting trouble. When he looked up at the house, his gaze lingered on her darkened window. For a moment she thought he might have seen her watching, but then he shouldered his leather jacket and headed for the front door. She heard his quiet footsteps on the stairs, the careful way he moved when trying not to wake their parents. Sarah lay in bed afterward, staring at the ceiling and wondering what secrets her brother was carrying. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. But now every sound seemed potentially threatening. Every shadow could be hiding someone with dangerous intentions. She had opened a door tonight that she wasn't sure she could close. The motorcycle's engine cut through the pre-dawn silence like a chainsaw through silk. Maya pressed herself against her bedroom window, watching as Jake wheeled his bike into the garage with practiced stealth. Even from the second floor, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow him home. She'd been waiting for 3 hours. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Chloe. "Still up? Saw your light on." Maya ignored it, her eyes fixed on the garage below. The overhead light flickered on, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Jake emerged from behind his bike, pulling off his leather jacket, and for a split second, Maya caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. More tattoos, fresh ones. The garage light went dark, and Jake's footsteps echoed on the basement stairs. Maya counted to 60 before slipping out of her room, bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The house creaked around her like an old ship, familiar sounds that had once been comforting but now seemed ominous. The basement door stood slightly ajar, yellow light seeping through the crack. She could hear water running. Jake washing up in the utility sink he'd installed last year, claiming he needed somewhere to clean motorcycle parts. Now Maya wondered what else he might be washing away. "Maya? That you up there?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Just getting water," she called back, her voice steadier than she felt. "Go back to bed. It's late." There was something different in his tone. Not the usual big brother authority, but something harder, more final, like he was giving her an order rather than advice. She retreated to the kitchen, actually filling a glass with water to maintain the illusion, but her mind was racing. The tattoo she'd seen on the Hell's Angel at Murphy's garage had been distinctive, a serpent wrapped around a dagger with some kind of symbol at the hilt. She'd only caught a glimpse of Jake's fresh ink, but the shape had looked disturbingly familiar. The water stopped running downstairs. Maya heard the clink of glass against metal, then Jake's voice, low and muffled, speaking to someone on the phone. "It's done. No, clean. Tuesday, same as we discussed. I know what's at stake." Maya's grip tightened on her water glass. She edged closer to the basement door, straining to hear more, but Jake's voice had dropped to barely a whisper. She caught fragments, pickup location, payment, and something that sounded like Murphy was right about the heat. Murphy, the same Murphy whose garage housed the tattooed Hell's Angel. The conversation ended with a sharp click. Maya raced back toward the stairs as quietly as possible, but not quickly enough. The basement door swung open just as she reached the landing. Maya. She turned, trying to look sleepy and innocent. Jake stood at the bottom of the steps, still shirtless, and now she could see them clearly, the tattoos covering his torso like a roadmap of secrets. The serpent and dagger prominently displayed over his heart, along with symbols she didn't recognize and what looked like dates etched in Gothic script along his ribs. Her brother had become a stranger. "Couldn't sleep," she said, holding up her water glass as evidence. Jake studied her face in the dim light filtering down from upstairs. For a moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear? Regret? Before his expression hardened again. "You should try melatonin." Mom keeps some in the medicine cabinet. Since when do you know so much about Mom's medicine cabinet? The question slipped out before she could stop it, sharper and more suspicious than she'd intended. Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Since I've been looking after this family while Dad's deployed, someone has to pay attention to details. It was a reasonable answer, but the way he delivered it felt rehearsed. Maya nodded and started up the stairs, acutely aware of Jake's eyes following her progress. At the top, she paused without turning around. "Jake, are you in some kind of trouble?" The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that made him sound decades older than 19. "We're all in trouble, Maya. The trick is making sure it's the right kind of trouble." Before she could ask what that meant, she heard his footsteps retreating into the basement and the soft click of a door closing. Maya stood alone in the darkened hallway, her brother's cryptic words echoing in her mind. Back in her room, she pulled out her laptop and began typing "Serpent Dagger Tattoo Hell's Angels" into the search engine. If Jake wouldn't give her answers, she'd find them herself. The first result made her stomach drop. The image on her screen was an exact match for what she'd seen on both men. It was the mark of the Iron Serpents, the most violent motorcycle club in 3 states. The leather jacket felt heavier in Maya's hands than it should have, like it carried the weight of secrets she wasn't ready to bear. She'd waited until the house fell into its familiar midnight silence before creeping into Alex's room, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floors. Now, sitting cross-legged on his unmade bed, she stared at the tattoo parlor business card she'd found tucked into the inner pocket. Midnight ink was embossed in Gothic letters across blood-red cardstock. An address she didn't recognize, but the phone number had been circled in Alex's distinctive handwriting. Below it, someone had scrawled "Ask for Snake" in different ink entirely. Maya's stomach churned. Snake. Even the name sounded dangerous. She turned the card over, finding a small symbol stamped into the corner. The same twisted serpent design she'd memorized from Alex's shoulder, and the Hell's Angels' massive forearm. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and typed the tattoo parlor's name into the search engine. The website that loaded made her blood run cold. Midnight Ink specialized in custom Brotherhood designs and loyalty markings. The gallery showed dozens of intricate tattoos, but one section was password protected. Private commissions, members only. A soft creak from downstairs made Maya freeze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She held her breath, counting the seconds until the old house settled back into silence. Their parents were heavy sleepers, but Alex had always been able to move like a ghost through the house when he wanted to sneak out, which, apparently, he'd been doing more often than she'd realized. Maya slipped the card back into the jacket and hung it carefully in Alex's closet, making sure everything looked exactly as she'd found it. But as she turned to leave, something else caught her eye, a small metal box pushed far back on his desk, hidden behind textbooks and college brochures. She knew she should leave, had already crossed too many lines tonight. But the serpent tattoo burned in her memory, and the way that Biker had looked at her outside the coffee shop made her skin crawl with the certainty that she was already involved in something whether she wanted to be or not. The box wasn't locked. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a thick silver ring carved with the same serpent design, but this version was more elaborate, the snake's eyes set with tiny red stones that seemed to glow in the dim light filtering through Alex's window. Underneath the ring, she found a folded piece of paper. Maya's hands shook as she unfolded it, revealing what looked like a contract written in dense legal language. Most of it was incomprehensible, full of phrases like lifetime commitment and blood oath, but certain words jumped out at her like physical blows: the Brotherhood of the Serpent, initiation requirements, and at the bottom, Alex's signature in bold black ink. The date made her stomach drop. He'd signed this 3 months ago, right around the time he'd started acting strange, right around the time he'd begun staying out late and deflecting her questions with forced smiles and obvious lies. A car door slammed outside. the sound echoing through the quiet neighborhood like a gunshot. Maya stuffed the paper back into the box and crept to Alex's window, peering through the blinds. Her brother's beat-up Honda was pulling into their driveway, but he wasn't alone. Another figure sat in the passenger seat, someone broad-shouldered and imposing even in silhouette. Maya's breath caught. Even in the darkness, she recognized the distinctive bulk of motorcycle leathers and the way the stranger moved as he climbed out of the car. It was him, the Hell's Angel from the coffee shop, standing in her family's driveway like he belonged there. She watched Alex and the biker talk in low voices beside the car, their body language suggesting an easy familiarity that made Maya's chest tight with betrayal. How long had this been going on? How long had her brother been living a double life while she worried about his college applications and whether he was eating enough? The biker handed Alex something, too small to see clearly from her vantage point, and clapped him on the shoulder like they were old friends. Then he was walking away, his heavy boots silent on the pavement despite their obvious weight. Maya watched him disappear around the corner, swallowed by shadows that seemed to welcome him. Alex stood alone in the driveway for a long moment, looking up at the house like he could feel her watching. Maya jerked back from the window, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the whole neighborhood could hear it. She had maybe 2 minutes before he came upstairs. Moving faster than she ever had in her life, Maya replaced the box exactly where she'd found it and slipped out of Alex's room, pulling his door closed with infinite care. She was back in her own bed, covers pulled up to her chin and eyes squeezed shut when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. But sleep was impossible now, because Maya finally understood that whatever her brother had gotten himself into, it was far more dangerous than she'd imagined. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Maya slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from Derek. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around the warm coffee mug, the ceramic offering little comfort against the chill that had settled deep in her bones since yesterday. Derek looked different somehow. The easy smile that usually played at the corners of his mouth was nowhere to be found, replaced by a tension that made his jaw appear sharper, more angular. His Stanford sweatshirt seemed like a costume now, a carefully constructed lie. "You've been avoiding me," Maya said, cutting straight through any pretense of small talk. "I've been busy with—" "Cut the crap, Derek!" The words came out harsher than she intended, but she was past caring about politeness. "I saw you talking to Cobra outside the garage yesterday. I saw his tattoo." Derek's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or recognition. Then the mask slipped back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about." Maya reached across the table and grabbed his wrist, pushing up the sleeve of his sweatshirt before he could stop her. There it was, the serpent wrapped around the dagger, its eyes seeming to stare directly at her with malevolent intelligence. "Then explain this." Derek jerked his arm back, yanking the sleeve down. His eyes darted around the nearly empty diner, checking to see if anyone had noticed. The paranoid gesture sent ice through Maya's veins. "Maya, you need to drop this, now." "Like hell I will." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "That's the same tattoo that Cobra has, the same one I've seen on at least 3 other Hell's Angels in the past week. So, either you've joined a motorcycle gang while studying for your SATs, or there's something you're not telling me." Derek was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee as if it might provide answers. When he finally looked up, Maya was shocked to see tears gathering in his eyes. "You don't understand how dangerous this is," he whispered. "If certain people knew you were asking questions—" "Then help me understand." Maya reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Derek, you're my brother. Whatever this is, we can figure it out together." "No, we can't." His voice was flat, final. "Some things can't be fixed, Maya. Some things just are." The bell above the diner's door chimed, and Maya glanced over to see a man in a leather jacket slide into a booth near the window. Nothing particularly threatening about him, but Derek had gone rigid, his face draining of color. "We need to go," he said, standing abruptly and tossing a $10 bill on the table. "Derek, wait!" But he was already moving toward the back exit, not even waiting to see if she followed. Maya grabbed her jacket and hurried after him, her mind racing. In the alley behind the diner, Derek was pacing like a caged animal. "Who was that guy?" Maya demanded. "Nobody. Just—" Derek ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he'd made as a kid when he was in trouble. "Maya, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll stop digging into this." "I can't do that." "You have to." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight enough to hurt. "You have no idea what you're messing with. These people, they don't just threaten, they follow through." Maya stared at her brother, this stranger wearing Derek's face, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. The protective bubble that had surrounded her entire life, the illusion that her family was normal and safe, finally burst completely. "What people, Derek? Who are you so afraid of?" For a moment, she thought he might actually tell her. His mouth opened, and she could see the words struggling to break free. Then his phone buzzed and he glanced down at the screen. Whatever he saw there made him take a step back from her. "I have to go," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Derek, please. Stay away from the garage, Maya. Stay away from Cobra, and stay away from me until this is over." "Until what's—" But he was already walking away, leaving her standing alone in the alley with more questions than answers. Maya watched until he disappeared around the corner, then leaned against the brick wall and tried to process what had just happened. Her brother was involved with the Hells Angels somehow. He was terrified of being seen with her, and he'd just told her to stay away from him. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Her finger hovered over the call button for a moment before she made her decision. Some truths were worth the risk. She dialed Detective Sarah Chen's number and waited for her to pick up. The morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains, but I'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying yesterday's events. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that tattoo, the serpent wrapped around the dagger, identical on both my brother's shoulder and the Hells Angel's forearm. The coincidence felt impossible, yet there it was, burned into my memory like a brand. I dragged myself downstairs, hoping coffee might clear the fog in my head. Mom was already in the kitchen, humming while she scrambled eggs, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked so normal, so perfectly suburban, that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined everything. "Morning, sweetheart," she said without turning around. "Want some breakfast?" "Just coffee." I poured myself a mug, studying her profile. Had she always had that small scar near her left ear? When had she gotten it? "You're up early for a Saturday." Couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen island, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "Mom, can I ask you something?" She finally turned, spatula in hand, and I caught something flickering across her face. Wariness, maybe fear. "Of course. That photo album you showed me last week, the one with pictures of you and Dad when you were young, were those really from college?" Her hand tightened on the spatula handle. "Why would you ask that? Some of the clothes looked, I don't know, different, tougher than what college kids usually wear." Mom's laugh sounded forced. "Fashion was different back then, Maya. We all dressed like we were in a rock band." I wanted to press further, but the sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs made us both look up. Jake appeared in the doorway, his hair messy from sleep, wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather. He'd been covering his arms a lot lately, I realized. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Jake, honey, you want eggs?" Mom's voice carried an artificial brightness. "I'm good." He avoided eye contact with both of us. I watched him carefully as he moved around the kitchen. There was something different about the way he carried himself, more aware, like he was constantly checking exits. When had my honor roll brother, the guy who spent Friday nights playing video games with his friends, started moving like someone with secrets? "I'm going out for a while," I announced, standing abruptly. "Where?" Mom asked too quickly. "Library. Research for that history paper." She nodded, but I caught her exchanging a look with Jake. Brief, but loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. 20 minutes later, I was parked outside Eddie's garage again, this time with a plan. Sort of. I'd brought my camera and a notebook, thinking I could pose as a student doing research on local businesses. It was weak, but better than nothing. The garage was busier today. Several motorcycles were parked outside, their chrome gleaming in the sunlight. I took a deep breath and walked toward the open bay doors, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Help you?" I spun around to find a woman about my mom's age watching me. She had short black hair streaked with silver and kind eyes that didn't match the leather vest she wore or the tattoos covering her arms. I'm doing a project on local businesses," I stammered, holding up my notebook like proof. She smiled. "School project?" "Yeah, for history class, about how businesses have changed over the years. Well, Eddie's been here since the 70s, started as just a regular auto shop." She gestured toward the garage. "You want to talk to Eddie himself?" Before I could respond, she was leading me inside. The smell of motor oil and cigarettes was overwhelming, and the sound of metal on metal echoed through the space. Men in grease-stained clothes worked on various vehicles, but I only had eyes for one thing, looking for that tattoo. "Eddie!" the woman called. "Got a student here wants to ask you some questions." A tall, thin man emerged from behind a truck, wiping his hands on a rag. He had grey hair pulled back in a ponytail and arms covered in ink, but from where I stood, I couldn't make out the details. "What kind of questions?" His voice was gravelly from years of cigarettes. I launched into my prepared spiel about local business history, but my eyes kept scanning the garage. Then I saw him, the man from yesterday, crouched beside a motorcycle near the back wall. Even from a distance, even though his back was turned, I recognized the broad shoulders and the way he held himself. As if sensing my stare, he looked up. Our eyes met across the garage, and his expression shifted from casual interest to sharp recognition. He stood slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. That's when I saw it clearly, the serpent and dagger tattoo on his forearm, exact match to my brother's. He started walking toward me, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the grey morning sky like a concrete monument to decay. Sarah's heart hammered as she followed Marcus through a gap in the chain-link fence, her sneakers crunching on broken glass and rusted metal shards. The smell of motor oil and something else, something metallic and wrong, hung heavy in the air. "This is insane," she whispered. But Marcus was already moving toward a side entrance, his movements fluid and purposeful in a way that reminded her uncomfortably of how different he'd become since returning home. Inside, shafts of dusty light filtered through grimy windows, illuminating rows of motorcycles in various states of assembly. Sarah's breath caught. These weren't just any bikes, they were Harleys, pristine and powerful, lined up like sleeping beasts. But it was the workstation in the corner that made her stomach drop. Stacks of plastic-wrapped packages sat beside grinding wheels and acetylene torches. The acrid smell she'd noticed outside was stronger here, chemical and sharp. Marcus moved to a metal cabinet and pulled out a small device that looked like a medical scanner. "What is that?" Sarah demanded, finding her voice. "Ultrasound wand," Marcus said without looking at her. He powered it on and approached one of the motorcycles. "Same technology hospitals use, but modified. Watch." He ran the device along the bike's frame, and a small screen displayed the metal's internal structure. Where the frame should have been solid, dark pockets appeared on the display, hollow spaces that definitely weren't part of the original design. "They're using the bike frames as transport," Marcus explained, his voice grim. "Heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, whatever pays best. They modify the frames, pack them full, then weld them shut. Perfect hiding spot. Border patrol, police, checkpoints, even drug dogs can't detect anything because it's sealed inside the metal." Sarah stared at the screen, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. "And your tattoo?" "Is a map." Marcus pulled up his sleeve, revealing the intricate design she'd memorized since childhood. Every line, every symbol, it shows the modification points, the exact locations where the frames are cut and resealed. Without this, you'd never know where to look. The weight of understanding crashed over her. You were their engineer. I designed the whole system. His voice cracked. I was young, stupid, needed money for Mom's cancer treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. They paid me more in 1 month than I could make in a year anywhere else. But you got out. I tried to. Marcus turned off the device, his hand shaking slightly. When I realized what I'd helped create, how much poison was flowing through these bikes across the country, I wanted out. But Viper made it clear that wasn't an option, so I ran. A motorcycle engine roared to life outside, then another. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "They know we're here," Marcus said, grabbing her arm. "We have to go. Now." They ran toward the back of the warehouse, but the sound of engines was coming from all directions now, a mechanical symphony of approaching death. Marcus pulled her behind a stack of shipping containers just as the front doors exploded inward. Viper's voice echoed through the space, calm and terrifying. "Marcus, son, I know you're here. Brought your little sister too, I see. That's touching, a real family reunion. Boots on concrete, moving closer." Sarah pressed herself against the cold metal, hardly daring to breathe. "You cost us a lot of money, boy," Viper continued. 3 years of rebuilding what you destroyed when you disappeared. 3 years of lost revenue because we couldn't trust anyone else with the modifications. But now you're back, and we can finally finish our conversation. Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand and pointed toward a window high on the far wall. She nodded, understanding. They began moving, staying low, using the containers as cover. "Your sister's got quite a mouth on her," Viper called out, his voice moving closer. "Telling stories in bars about tattoos and secrets made us realize we'd been thinking about this all wrong. Why hunt you down when we could just wait for you to come to us?" Sarah's chest tightened. They'd been played. Her conversation with Tommy hadn't been overheard. It had been orchestrated. They'd wanted her to find out, wanted her to lead them to Marcus. They reached the far wall, but the window was too high. Marcus interlaced his fingers, creating a step. "Go," he whispered. "Not without you. Sarah, listen to me." His eyes were fierce, desperate. "There's a storage unit downtown, number 247. The keys taped under Mom's kitchen sink. Inside you'll find everything. Financial records, names, locations, enough evidence to bring down their entire operation. Get it to Detective Rodriguez at the 5th Precinct." Marcus. Footsteps were closing in. He boosted her up toward the window. "I love you, sis. Tell Mom I'm sorry." "Found them," someone shouted. Sarah tumbled through the window as gunshots erupted behind her. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph on her laptop screen. The image was grainy, pulled from a news article about a police raid on the Devil's Serpents clubhouse 3 years ago, but there was no mistaking the face in the background. Younger, cleaner shaven, but unmistakably her father. She'd been searching for hours, following threads that led deeper into a world she'd never imagined existed. What started as curiosity about Jake's tattoo had become an obsession with understanding why her family felt like strangers. Now, seeing her father's face among known criminals, the ground beneath her entire life seemed to crumble. The bedroom door creaked behind her. Maya slammed the laptop shut and spun around to find Jake standing in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "You think?" Maya's voice cracked. "I just found a photo of Dad at a Hells Angels clubhouse. So, yeah, I'd say we need to talk." Jake stepped inside and closed the door behind him. For a moment, he looked like the big brother she'd always known. Protective, careful, someone who would shield her from the world's darkness. Then his expression hardened, and she saw something else entirely. "How much do you know?" he asked. "I know you have the same tattoo as Tommy Reeves. I know Dad's been lying about his past. And I know you're both involved in something that could get us all killed." Maya stood up, her laptop clutched against her chest like armor. "What I don't know is why no one thought to tell me that my entire life is apparently built on lies." Jake ran a hand through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made Maya's chest ache. We were protecting you. From what? From this. From knowing that Dad used to run guns for the devils. From understanding that the money that paid for this house, for your college fund, for everything we have, it came from blood. The words hit Maya like physical blows. She sank back into her desk chair, the laptop sliding from her numb fingers. The garage business. Real now. Dad went legitimate when you were born. But his past doesn't just disappear, Maya. These people don't let you walk away clean. And you? Maya's voice was barely a whisper. What's your excuse? Jake was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words came out rushed and desperate. Tommy Reeves came to me 6 months ago. Said Dad owed a debt from the old days. Said there were people in the organization who felt he'd been treated too well, allowed to leave too easily. They wanted proof of loyalty. So you got the tattoo? I did jobs for them. Small stuff at first, running messages, delivering packages. But then they wanted more. Jake's hands clenched into fists. They said if I proved myself worthy, they'd consider Dad's debt paid. If I didn't, they'd hurt us. They'd hurt you? Jake's eyes met hers, and Maya saw the weight of months of fear and guilt crushing down on him. Everything I did was to keep you safe. Maya felt tears burning her throat, but anger burned hotter. You don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what I can handle. You're 17, Maya. You shouldn't have to handle any of this. But I do now, don't I? Maya stood up again, pacing to the window. The suburban street looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but everything felt different. Because you and Dad made choices that dragged me into this, whether you wanted to protect me or not. Jake was silent behind her. Maya pressed her forehead against the cool glass and tried to think through the chaos in her head. What happens now? I finish what they asked me to do. One more job and Dad's debt is clear. Maya turned around. What kind of job? The hesitation in Jake's expression told her everything she needed to know. Whatever it was bad enough that even after everything he'd already confessed, he didn't want to tell her. Jake, what kind of job? There's another garage across town. Guy named Martinez runs it, but he's been talking to the police about Devil's Serpents operations. They want to send a message. They want you to hurt someone. I won't let it go that far. I'll figure something out, make it look convincing without anyone getting seriously injured. Maya stared at her brother, this person she'd shared a house with her entire life, who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped her with homework and driven her to school when she missed the bus. Now he was talking about committing assault, like it was a math problem to be solved. There has to be another way, she said. Jake's smile was bitter and tired. I've been looking for another way for 6 months. This is it. But Maya was already thinking, her mind racing through possibilities. If her family's secrets had taught her anything, it was that there were always more options than the obvious ones. The question was how far she was willing to go to save them all. The abandoned warehouse on the east side of town looked like every other derelict building Maya had passed on her way here, but something about its skeletal frame against the grey sky made her stomach clench. She parked 2 blocks away, just as the anonymous text had instructed, and walked the rest of the distance with her phone clutched in her sweaty palm. Come alone, Pier 47 Warehouse, 11 p.m. You want answers about your brother? Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane. But rational had died the moment she'd seen that tattoo, the moment her world had tilted off its axis. Now she was operating on pure, desperate need to understand what was happening to her family. The warehouse door hung open just wide enough for a person to slip through. Maya hesitated at the threshold, listening for any sound from within. Nothing but the distant hum of traffic and the whisper of wind through broken windows. "Hello?" she called softly, stepping into the cavernous space. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, casting strange shadows across the concrete floor littered with debris. Her footsteps echoed despite her attempts to move quietly. "You came." Maya spun toward the voice, her heart hammering. A figure emerged from behind a stack of shipping containers, tall, lean, wearing dark clothes that made him nearly invisible in the shadows. As he moved closer, she could make out his features, sharp cheekbones, dark hair, eyes that seemed too knowing for someone who couldn't be much older than her brother. "Who are you?" she demanded, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Someone who knew your father." He stopped about 10 feet away, hands visible but relaxed at his sides. "My name's Connor Walsh. My father's dead." "I know." His expression softened slightly. "I was there when it happened." The words hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible. He died in a car accident when I was 8. Connor shook his head slowly. "Your father was murdered, Maya. Shot 3 times in the chest by Vincent Viper Morrison, the same man whose tattoo your brother now carries." The warehouse seemed to tilt around her. Maya reached out blindly, finding the cold metal of a shipping container to steady herself. "You're lying." "I wish I was." Connor pulled something from his jacket, a manila folder worn at the edges. "Your father was trying to get out. He'd been with the Serpents since he was 16, but when you were born, everything changed. He wanted a different life for his family. The Serpents. What the hell's Angels call themselves around here? Your father was deep in their operations, money laundering, drug distribution, protection rackets, but he was planning to testify against them in exchange for witness protection." Maya's legs felt weak. She slid down the container until she was sitting on the concrete floor, staring up at this stranger who was systematically destroying everything she thought she knew. "Viper found out about the deal," Connor continued, his voice gentle but relentless. "Your father never made it to the courthouse. The car accident was staged to cover up the murder." "How do you know all this?" "Because I was supposed to be his handler. FBI." Connor crouched down so they were at eye level. "I was a rookie then, barely older than you are now. Your father's death, it's haunted me for 9 years. Maya stared at the folder in his hands. "What's in there?" "Evidence. Photos, reports that were buried to protect the investigation." He held it out to her, "and information about what's happening to your brother." She took the folder with trembling hands but didn't open it. "Ethan doesn't know, does he? About our father?" "I don't think so. But Viper does. He's been watching your family ever since your father died, waiting. Waiting for what?" "For the right moment to complete his revenge. Taking your father's son, turning him into everything your father tried to escape. That's Viper's idea of poetic justice." Maya finally opened the folder. The first photo made her gasp. Her father, but not as she remembered him. This man was younger, harder, wearing the same leather jacket she'd seen in the photos on Ethan's computer, the same tattoo visible on his forearm. "The initiation your brother went through," Connor said quietly. "It's not just about joining the gang, it's about completing a circle that started with your father's death. I have to get him out. It's not that simple. If Ethan tries to leave now, he's a dead man. Viper's made sure of that." Maya looked up from the photos, anger blazing through her fear. "Then what do you suggest? That I just watch my brother destroy his life?" Connor's expression grew grim. "There might be a way, but it would mean finishing what your father started, and it would put you in more danger than you can imagine." The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of Maya's rapid breathing. In her hands, the evidence of her father's real life felt like a loaded weapon. "Tell me what I have to do." Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph Danny had given her. The image was grainy, obviously taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, but clear enough to make her stomach drop. Her brother Jake stood beside a massive Harley, his arm around a woman she didn't recognize. But it wasn't the woman that made her blood run cold. It was the leather vest Jake wore, the same vest she'd seen Razor and his crew sporting, complete with the Hells Angels patches. "This was taken 3 years ago," Danny said quietly, watching her face. 6 months before Jake supposedly died in that car accident. Maya's mind raced. Jake had been 25 when he died, or when they thought he'd died. She remembered the funeral, remembered holding her mother as she sobbed over the closed casket. They'd been told his body was too damaged from the crash and fire for viewing. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "I've been working this case for 2 years," Danny replied. "Your brother didn't die in any accident, Maya. He faked his death because he stole something from the Hells Angels, something worth killing for." The warehouse around them felt suddenly smaller, more oppressive. Maya could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "That's impossible. Jake wouldn't." "Wouldn't what? Join a motorcycle gang, deal drugs, steal from criminals?" Danny's voice was gentle but firm. "People aren't always who we think they are, especially family." Maya thought about the tattoo she'd seen on Jake's shoulder during those final months before his death. The one that had gotten her into this nightmare in the first place. She'd assumed it was just another of his rebellious phases, like the motorcycle he'd bought or the leather jacket he'd started wearing. "What did he steal?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Danny hesitated. "Money, a lot of it, but not just any money. The Angels cut from a major drug operation. We're talking about $2 million that went missing the same night Jake's car went off that bridge. $2 million. Maya felt dizzy. Her family had struggled financially after Jake's death, her mother working double shifts just to keep their apartment, all while Jake was alive somewhere with enough money to solve all their problems. If Jake's alive, where is he? The question came out as barely a whisper. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. And that's why you're in danger now." Danny pulled out another photograph, this one showing Razor and several other Angels standing around what looked like a shipping container. "When you mentioned Jake's tattoo to Razor, you confirmed what they've suspected for years, that Jake Morrison didn't really die in that crash." Maya studied the second photograph more closely. In the background, barely visible, was a figure that could have been Jake. Older, bearded, but with the same lean build and way of standing that she remembered. "I think I know where he is," she said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Exactly. And they're not going to stop until they get answers." Danny leaned forward. "Maya, these people have killed for less. If they think you're holding out on them..." She didn't need him to finish the sentence. She'd seen the look in Razor's eyes, felt the barely contained violence radiating from him and his crew. They would hurt her family without hesitation if they thought it would lead them to Jake. "But I don't know anything," she said desperately. "I really thought he was dead. We all did." "I believe you, but convincing them is going to be harder." Danny's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression darkening. "We need to move. Now. What's wrong?" "My contact just saw 3 Angels' bikes heading toward your apartment building." Terror shot through Maya like ice water. "My mom, she's working the night shift, but she might come home early if..." "We'll call her from the car. Come on." As they hurried toward Danny's vehicle, Maya's mind churned with questions and implications. If Jake was alive, did that mean he knew about the danger he'd put their family in? Had he been watching them all these years, knowing they believed he was dead while they struggled to rebuild their lives? The worst part was the growing realization that she might never get answers. If the Hells Angels found Jake before she did, or if they decided the Morrison family knew too much, it might not matter what the truth really was. Danny's car roared to life, and as they sped through the dark streets toward her neighborhood, Maya made a decision. She was done being a victim in this game. Whatever Jake had done, whatever secrets he was hiding, she was going to find him first, even if it meant walking straight into the heart of the storm he'd created. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, with an undercurrent of something Maya couldn't identify. Something metallic and sharp that made her stomach clench. She pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, heart hammering as voices echoed from deeper inside the cavernous space. "You're 3 weeks late, Danny." The voice was gravelly, weathered by years of cigarettes and shouting over motorcycle engines. Maya recognized it from the gas station. Viper, the Hells Angel with Jake's tattoo. That's not like the Reeves family. Her brother's laugh was hollow, nothing like the easy chuckle she'd grown up hearing across the dinner table. Things got complicated. Maya's been asking questions. "Your baby sister?" Another voice, younger but no less dangerous. "Thought you had that handled." Maya's blood turned to ice. They were talking about her like she was a problem to be solved, a loose thread to be cut. She fumbled for her phone, desperate to record whatever came next, but her hands were shaking too badly to unlock the screen. She found the photo, Jake continued, and Maya could hear him pacing, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The one of Dad with the club. I thought Mom had burned everything. Your old man was careful, Viper said, but he wasn't perfect. None of us are. There was a scraping sound, like a chair being pulled across concrete. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Maya squeezed her eyes shut, pressing harder against the wall. She should run, should get back to her car and drive straight to the police station, but her legs felt like they were made of lead, and Jake's next words rooted her to the spot. She's my sister. I'm not going to hurt her. Nobody's talking about hurting her, the younger voice said, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. But she can't know about the operation. Too much money at stake. What operation? Jake's voice was sharp with sudden alarm. I thought we were done after Dad died. I thought I just had to make one last run, honor the agreement, and then... Then what? Viper's laugh was like broken glass. You thought you could just walk away? Go to college, become a lawyer, or whatever the hell you're planning? It doesn't work that way, kid. Blood in, blood out. Your daddy knew that. Maya's phone finally unlocked, and she managed to start recording, though her hands were still trembling. Through the gap between two shipping containers she could see them now. Jake standing with his arms crossed, defiant but clearly scared, facing three leather-clad bikers who looked like they could crush him without breaking a sweat. My dad's debt died with him, Jake said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Your dad's debt, sure. Viper leaned back in his chair, casual as if they were discussing the weather. But you've been running product for us for 2 years now. That makes you part of the family, and family doesn't abandon family. The third man, who hadn't spoken yet, stepped forward into Maya's line of sight. He was massive, with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and arms covered in tattoos that seemed to writhe in the dim light. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly soft. Your sister goes to Jefferson High, doesn't she? Pretty little thing. Be a shame if she had an accident walking home from school one day. Jake moved so fast Maya almost missed it. 1 second he was standing with his arms crossed. The next he had the big man by the front of his leather vest, slamming him back against a shipping container. The sound reverberated through the warehouse like a gunshot. Don't you ever... Jake started, but Viper was already on his feet, and Maya heard the distinctive click of a gun being cocked. Let him go, Danny. Jake released the bigger man slowly, his hands raised, but Maya could see the fury radiating from every line of his body. She'd never seen her brother like this, violent, dangerous. It was like looking at a stranger wearing Jake's face. Here's what's going to happen, Viper continued, the gun still trained on Jake. You're going to make the run to Phoenix next week. You're going to pick up the shipment and bring it back here, just like you've been doing. And you're going to make sure your sister stops asking questions about things that don't concern her. And if I refuse, then we'll have to get creative about keeping your family quiet. Viper's smile was all teeth, permanently. Maya's recording stopped as her phone's memory filled up, but she hardly noticed. She was too busy trying not to throw up as the full scope of what she'd stumbled into finally hit her. Her father hadn't just known these men, he'd been one of them. And now they owned Jake, were using him to run drugs, threatening her to keep him in line. She had to get out of there before they discovered her, had to think, had to figure out how to save her brother from a world that was already swallowing him whole. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, a graveyard of broken dreams scattered across oil-stained concrete. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she followed Jake deeper into the shadows, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Moonlight filtered through grimy windows, casting everything in silver and black. This is where it all started, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stopped beside an old workbench covered in tools and motorcycle parts. Where Dad taught us everything we needed to know. Maya's mouth went dry. Us? Jake rolled up his sleeve, revealing the tattoo that had started this nightmare. The serpent coiled around the dagger seemed to move in the shifting light. Me and Marcus. We were prospects together, Maya. Brothers in every sense that mattered. The words hit her like physical blows. You're lying. I wish I was. Jake's hand trembled as he traced the ink on his forearm. Dad wasn't just a member of the Devil's Disciples, he was their enforcer, their killer. And when the feds finally got close enough to bring him down, he made a choice. Maya backed away until her spine hit cold metal. A motorcycle. She spun around and found herself staring at a pristine Harley, its chrome gleaming despite the warehouse's decay. On the gas tank, painted in intricate detail, was the same serpent and dagger from the tattoos. Dad's bike, Jake continued. The one he was riding the night he died. Except he didn't die in an accident, Maya. He drove straight into that tree because he knew what was coming. He knew they'd torture him for information about the club, about all of us. Stop. Maya's voice cracked. Just stop talking. But Jake pressed on, relentless. Marcus kept the secret, helped Mom reinvent our family, create new identities, clean records, a fresh start. All we had to do was stay away from anything connected to the old life. No crime, no gangs, no trouble. Then why? Maya's hands clenched into fists. Why did you get involved with Marcus again? Why risk everything? Jake's laugh was bitter and sharp. Because some debts never get paid, little sister. Because 3 weeks ago, Marcus showed up at my job and told me the Devil's Disciples were being investigated again, federal task force, and they'd found something that connected Dad to murders we thought were buried forever. The warehouse suddenly felt smaller, the shadows pressing in from all sides. Maya struggled to breathe. What kind of murders? The kind that don't have a statute of limitations. Jake moved to another workbench and picked up a manila folder. Rival gang members, a prosecutor who was getting too close, a witness who was going to testify. He threw the folder at Maya's feet. Photographs spilled out, black and white images of crime scenes she didn't want to see. Maya stared at the photos without really seeing them. Her mind reeled, trying to process the magnitude of what Jake was telling her. Their father hadn't been a mechanic who died in a tragic accident. He'd been a killer who chose suicide over capture. The feds connected Dad's DNA to evidence they'd preserved, Jake continued. But here's the thing about federal investigations. They don't just go after the dead. They go after everyone connected. Family members, associates. They were going to come for Mom, Maya. They were going to destroy what little piece she'd managed to build. So, you what? Decided to clean up Dad's mess? Jake's eyes hardened. I decided to protect our family. Marcus had contacts, people who could make evidence disappear. But everything comes with a price. He needed someone on the inside of the task force, someone who could feed him information about their progress. Maya felt sick. The prosecutor, Sarah Chen. You were using me to get close to her. No. Jake's denial was immediate and fierce. That was never the plan. You getting involved with her daughter was just bad timing. Horrible, cruel timing that complicated everything. But you used it anyway. Jake's silence was answer enough. Maya kicked at the scattered photographs, watching them slide across the concrete. And now Marcus is dead, shot in his own clubhouse. How does that fit into your grand plan to protect the family? It doesn't. Jake's voice broke. Someone else knew about the evidence. Someone who wanted Marcus dead and was willing to frame me for it. The gun they found has my fingerprints on it, Maya. Ballistics will match. By tomorrow morning, every cop in the state will be looking for me. Maya looked at her brother, really looked at him, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of secrets and lies. He looked older than his 19 years, aged by choices that had spiraled beyond his control. Who? She asked. Who else knew? Jake met her eyes, and in his gaze she saw fear that chilled her to the bone. I think it was Mom. The warehouse smelled like rust and old motor oil, shadows dancing across concrete walls as Maya followed her brother deeper into what felt like the belly of a beast. Jake's footsteps echoed ahead of her, confident despite the tremor she'd noticed in his hands when he'd finally agreed to bring her here. "You sure about this?" he whispered over his shoulder, pausing at a heavy steel door marked only with a spray-painted serpent. Maya nodded, though her throat felt like sandpaper. After everything she'd learned about their father's past, about the brotherhood that had claimed him before she was born, she needed to see this through. The tattoo on Jake's shoulder wasn't just ink, it was a brand, a promise, a blood debt that apparently ran in their family. Jake knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more. The door creaked open to reveal a mountain of a man with graying braids and arms like tree trunks. His eyes swept over Maya with obvious displeasure. "She doesn't belong here, Prospect. She's family, Crusher, Tommy's daughter." The name hit the air like a physical force. Crusher's expression shifted, something between respect and wariness crossing his weathered features. He stepped aside, motioning them through. The main floor buzzed with activity that made Maya's skin crawl. Men in leather vests worked over motorcycle engines, their movements precise despite the beer bottles scattered around workbenches. Country music blared from speakers that had seen better decades, mixing with the sound of air tools and rough laughter. But it was the man in the center of it all who made Maya's blood freeze. Vincent Viper Morrison sat on a throne fashioned from motorcycle parts, his presence commanding the space like a dark king holding court. The serpent tattoo covering his neck seemed to writhe in the flickering fluorescent light, and when his pale eyes locked onto Maya, she understood why grown men crossed the street to avoid him. "Well, well," Viper's voice carried over the noise, causing conversations to die mid-sentence. "Tommy Reeves's little girl, all grown up." Maya forced herself to walk forward, Jake close beside her. She could feel dozens of eyes tracking their movement, measuring, judging. These men knew her father in ways she was only beginning to understand. "You want answers," Viper continued, rising from his makeshift throne. "About Daddy's legacy, about why your brother came sniffing around here like a lost puppy." "I want the truth," Maya said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Viper laughed, the sound scraping against her nerves. "Truth's a luxury in this world, Princess, but I'll give you what you're really after." He gestured to Jake. "Tell her what you told me, Prospect, about the debt." Jake's jaw worked silently before the words came out in a rush. "Dad didn't just leave the club, Maya. He took something when he went, money that wasn't his, a lot of money." The warehouse seemed to tilt around her. "What are you talking about?" "Club treasury," Viper supplied, circling them now like a predator. "Your precious daddy cleaned us out before he disappeared into suburbia with your mother, left us hanging when we needed that cash for business ventures." Maya's mind raced, pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. Her father's mysterious death 3 years ago, the life insurance policy that had seemed too good to be true, Jake's sudden interest in motorcycles and leather jackets. "The debt passes down," Viper continued. "Blood for blood, family for family. That's club law. Tommy's boy understands that. Don't you, Jake?" Her brother's nod was barely perceptible, but it hit Maya like a physical blow. "You're working for them." "I'm trying to fix what Dad broke," Jake said quietly. "The debt's more than money now. It's about respect, honor." "It's about drugs," a voice said from the shadows. All heads turned as Detective Sarah Chen stepped into the light, her weapon drawn but lowered. Maya's relief at seeing a familiar face warred with confusion about how the detective had found them. "Nobody move," Chen commanded, though her eyes stayed fixed on Viper. "This warehouse is surrounded." Viper's smile was all teeth. "Cops. Should have known the Reeves family would bring heat." His hand moved toward his jacket. "Don't," Chen warned, raising her weapon. "Vincent Morrison, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy." The warehouse erupted into chaos. Men scattered toward exits that Maya hoped were already blocked. Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her behind an overturned workbench as shouts and the sound of splintering wood filled the air. "This isn't over," Viper called out as officers in tactical gear flooded through multiple entrances. The debt doesn't die with handcuffs, Prospect. Remember that. As Chen approached their hiding spot, Maya realized this confrontation was only the beginning. Her father's sins had painted a target on their family that wouldn't disappear with arrests and trials. Some stains, she was learning, went deeper than blood. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them like a concrete tomb, its broken windows reflecting the dying light of dusk. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she crouched behind the rusted dumpster, watching the Iron Serpent's bikes lined up like metal predators outside the building. The rumble of engines had fallen silent 20 minutes ago, but the danger still hung thick in the air. "We shouldn't be here," Jake whispered beside her, his voice barely audible above the wind whistling through the industrial district. "If they catch us—" "They won't," Maya cut him off, though her own terror made the words sound hollow. She pulled out her phone and checked the recording app one more time. The red dot glowed steadily, ready to capture whatever truth lay waiting inside those walls. We need proof of what really happened to Marcus. Through the grimy windows, she could see shadows moving inside, voices carried on the wind, too distant to make out words but close enough to send ice through her veins. Somewhere in that building, Snake Valdez was conducting business that could either save her family or destroy them completely. Maya thought of her parents, probably sitting at the kitchen table right now, wondering where she was. Her mother's worried face flashed before her eyes, followed by her father's stern warnings about staying away from the bikers. They had no idea that their son's secrets had already painted a target on their backs, that running and hiding would only delay the inevitable. The truth was the only thing that could set them free. A door slammed somewhere inside the warehouse, and Maya flinched. She forced herself to move closer, staying low as she approached the building's side wall. A section of corrugated metal had come loose near the foundation, creating a gap just wide enough for someone her size to squeeze through. "Maya, don't," Jake hissed, but she was already on her belly, wriggling through the opening. The smell hit her first: motor oil, stale cigarettes, and something else that made her stomach turn. She found herself in a narrow space between the outer wall and a stack of wooden crates. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead, clearer now but still muffled by distance and concrete. "Told you the kid was trouble from the start," a gravelly voice was saying. Maya recognized it immediately as Snake's lieutenant, the man with the scarred hands who'd threatened her family. "Should have handled him permanent-like when we had the chance." "Marcus served his purpose," Snake replied, his tone cold as winter steel. "He got us inside information on the police raids for 2 years, but when he started growing a conscience—" Maya's blood turned to ice. Marcus had been feeding information to the Iron Serpents. Her brother, who'd always talked about joining the police force, had been working with the very criminals they were supposed to stop. "The little sister's been asking too many questions," another voice added. "Maybe it's time to send a clearer message." Snake's laugh was like broken glass. "The girl's got spirit, I'll give her that. Reminds me of Marcus when he first came to us, all self-righteous and determined to do the right thing. Look how that turned out." Maya pressed herself deeper into the shadows as footsteps approached her hiding spot. Her phone felt slippery in her sweating palm, but the recording was still going. Every word was being captured, every admission of guilt preserved. "What about the family?" Scarred Hands asked. "They're loose ends," Snake said simply. "And you know how I feel about loose ends." The footsteps stopped directly above her hiding place. Maya held her breath until her lungs burned, certain that her thundering heartbeat would give her away. But after an eternity, the steps moved on. "Marcus thought he could just walk away," Snake continued. "Thought he could disappear, start fresh somewhere new. But nobody leaves the serpents alive, not when they know what he knew. So the accident wasn't an accident," Snake finished. "Kid should have known better than to cross me. Should have known I'd find him no matter where he ran." Maya's vision blurred as tears stung her eyes. Marcus hadn't died in a random motorcycle crash. He'd been murdered, hunted down like an animal because he'd tried to escape the web of corruption he'd gotten tangled in. But why had he started working with them in the first place? Her brother had been many things, but never a criminal. There had to be more to the story. "Boss," a new voice called out. "We got movement outside. Looks like someone followed us." Maya's blood froze. Jake must have been spotted. "Well, well," Snake said, and she could hear the grin in his voice. "Looks like our little problem just solved itself. Bring them in, both of them. Time for the Martinez family to have a proper reunion with their dear departed Marcus." Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph Tommy had slid across the diner table. The black and white image showed her father, younger, harder looking, wearing the same leather vest she'd seen in the garage, but it was the man standing beside him that made her blood freeze. Marcus Reaper Volkov, though decades younger, was unmistakably the same monster who'd been hunting her family. "Your dad didn't just leave the serpents," Tommy said quietly, glancing around the nearly empty diner. "He betrayed them. Took something that wasn't his to take." "What are you talking about?" Maya's voice barely rose above a whisper. Tommy lit another cigarette, his weathered face grim. "There was a job, big one. Supposed to be the score that set everyone up for life. Your father was the inside man, had connections at the armored car company through a buddy from his army days, but when it went down..." He paused, exhaling smoke. "David vanished with the entire take, $2 million in cash." Maya felt the world tilt sideways. "That's impossible. My dad worked construction. He was a lot of things you didn't know about, kid." Tommy's eyes held genuine sympathy. The serpents had been planning that heist for months. Reaper put up most of the front money, brought in outside muscle. When David disappeared with everything, it didn't just ruin the club. It made enemies of some very dangerous people. The coffee in Maya's stomach turned acidic. So he stole the money and just started a family? Built a normal life? That's what I thought for years. But now, seeing how desperate Reaper is to find you and Jake..." Tommy stubbed out his cigarette. "I don't think your father kept that money for himself." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. David knew those tattoos would mark his kids for life. He wouldn't have branded them unless he had no choice, unless the symbols meant something more than just membership." Maya's mind raced back to Jake's words about their father's stories, about treasure maps and secret codes. The tattoos. They're not just club marks, are they? Tommy nodded grimly. "The design your father chose, it's not standard serpent ink. I should know. I've seen every variation over the years. But those specific symbols, that particular arrangement..." He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo he'd apparently researched. "Your father was always clever with codes. Military training, you know." The image on Tommy's phone showed Jake's tattoo, but with notations and lines drawn over it. What had seemed like artistic flourishes suddenly looked deliberate, purposeful. "He hid the location," Maya breathed. "In the tattoos." "That's my guess. Split the information between his kids, figuring they'd be safer that way. Problem is, Reaper's figured it out too. That's why he needs both you and Jake alive." One tattoo's only half the puzzle. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Where are you? Jake's asking for you." The normalcy of the message felt surreal against everything she'd just learned. Her mother, making dinner and worrying about where her daughter was, while their entire family sat on top of a buried fortune that could get them all killed. "I have to go home," Maya said, standing abruptly. Tommy caught her wrist. "Kid, wait. You can't just walk back into this blind. Reaper's got people watching your house, your school, everywhere you might turn up. And now that he knows about me..." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your family's out of time. Those guys who came after me tonight, they weren't trying to scare me. They wanted information, and when they couldn't get it..." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing deep bruises and cuts. "Lucky for me, I still remember how to fight dirty." Maya stared at his injuries, the reality hitting her like a physical blow. "This is all my fault. I came looking for you, and now..." "Now nothing. This was always going to happen. The only difference is now you know what you're dealing with." Tommy pulled out a pen, scribbling something on a napkin. This is where I'll be tonight, an old safe house from back in the day. You bring your brother, and we figure out what your father really left you." Maya took the napkin, her hands still shaking. "And then what? Even if we find the money, Reaper's never going to let us just walk away." Tommy's expression hardened, and for a moment she could see the dangerous man he'd once been. "Let me worry about Reaper. You just focus on keeping your family alive long enough to finish this." As Maya hurried toward her car, Tommy's words echoed in her mind. Her father hadn't just left them a secret, he'd left them a burden. And now, with Jake's life hanging in the balance and Reaper closing in, she had less than 24 hours to decode a puzzle that had been 15 years in the making. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the blood on her shirt. Not her blood, Marcus's. The warehouse around them felt like a tomb, filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the metallic tang of violence. Her brother lay unconscious against a shipping crate, his breathing shallow but steady. At least he was alive. "We need to get him to a hospital," she whispered. But Dad shook his head grimly. "Too many questions. Bullet wounds require police reports." He knelt beside Marcus, examining the wound in his shoulder. "It went clean through. We can handle this." The sound of motorcycle engines rumbled in the distance, growing closer. Maya's stomach dropped. "They're coming back!" Dad's face hardened as he pulled out his phone. Time for some old debts to be paid. His fingers moved swiftly across the screen, typing a message Maya couldn't see. Within seconds, his phone buzzed with a response. "What are you doing?" Maya demanded. "Calling in the cavalry." Dad's voice carried a weight she'd never heard before. "There are things about our family you still don't understand, Maya. Loyalties that run deeper than blood." The warehouse door exploded inward as 3 figures burst through. Maya instinctively stepped in front of Marcus, but Dad held up his hand. "Easy, they're with us." The first man through the door was massive, his leather vest adorned with patches Maya recognized from her research. Hell's Angels. But these weren't the enemies who had just tried to kill them. The leader, a grizzled man with silver hair and arms covered in tattoos, nodded respectfully to Dad. "Been a long time, Tommy," the man said. "Too long, Razor." Dad's stance relaxed slightly. "I need to get my kids out of here." Razor's eyes swept over Maya and Marcus. "The boy looks like you did at his age. Same stubborn streak, I'm betting." His gaze lingered on Marcus's unconscious form. "Heard he got mixed up with Viper's crew, not by choice. Never is." Razor signaled to his companions, "We'll handle cleanup here. You get your family to safety." Maya watched in stunned silence as these dangerous-looking men she'd been taught to fear, worked with military efficiency to help them. One of them, a woman with intricate sleeve tattoos, gently lifted Marcus as if he weighed nothing. "My van's out back," she said softly. "We'll take the back roads to avoid any of Viper's scouts." As they moved through the warehouse, Dad caught Maya's arm. "I know you have questions. When we're safe, I'll tell you everything." "You keep saying that, but we're never safe." Maya's voice cracked with exhaustion and frustration. "Mom's dead. Marcus almost died tonight. And now I find out you have some secret alliance with Hell's Angels? What else don't I know?" Dad's expression crumbled for a moment. "Your mother knew the risks when she married me. She chose love over safety." "What risks? What are you talking about?" Before Dad could answer, Razor appeared beside them. "Save the family therapy for later. We need to move. Viper's crew is regrouping, and they're bringing reinforcements." They loaded Marcus into the van, his head resting on Maya's lap as the woman, who'd introduced herself only as Phoenix, drove through the dark streets. Maya pressed a clean cloth against Marcus's wound, trying to stay calm as her brother drifted in and out of consciousness. "Maya?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. The tattoo. It wasn't what I wanted." His eyes struggled to focus. "They forced me. Said if I didn't get it, they'd hurt you and Mom." Maya's heart clenched. "Mom's gone, Marcus." Marcus's eyes widened, clarity returning. "What? When?" "2 days ago. They made it look like an accident, but Dad says she knew too much." Dad's voice carried from the front seat. Your mother was getting close to exposing Viper's operation. She'd been investigating the connections between the local police and the trafficking ring. The pieces clicked into place in Maya's mind. Mom wasn't just a social worker. She was investigating them. She was protecting kids like the ones Marcus was trying to help, kids being forced into things no child should endure. Dad's hands clenched into fists. Viper killed her to send a message. Phoenix glanced in the rearview mirror. Your mom was good people, kid. She helped a lot of kids escape before Viper figured out what she was doing. Maya felt the weight of revelation settling over her like a heavy blanket. Everything she'd thought she knew about her family was a lie, but somehow the truth made more sense. Her mother's late nights, her father's mysterious absences, Marcus's increasingly desperate behavior. It all connected to something bigger and more dangerous than she'd imagined. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere Viper can't reach you," Razor said. "But this isn't over. He won't stop until your entire family is dead." Maya looked down at her unconscious brother and made a silent vow. She was done running and hiding. It was time to fight back. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, its concrete floors stained with decades of mechanical work. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she crouched behind a stack of old tires, watching her brother Jake pace back and forth under the harsh fluorescent lights. The dragon tattoo on his forearm seemed to writhe in the flickering illumination. "You shouldn't have come here, Maya." Jake's voice carried across the empty space, calm but edged with something she'd never heard before. "This isn't some game you can just walk away from." She stepped out from her hiding spot, her hands trembling despite her effort to appear brave. "Then explain it to me. Explain why you have the same tattoo as Vincent Kowalski. Explain why Mom's been lying to us for 17 years. Jake stopped pacing and turned to face her fully. In the harsh light, she could see how much he'd changed over the past few months. The easy smile was gone, replaced by hard lines around his eyes. He looked older, dangerous even. "Dad didn't die in a car accident," he said quietly. "Vincent Kowalski killed him." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her vision blurring. "What?" Dad was Vincent's enforcer, his right-hand man. The tattoo, it's a mark of brotherhood in the Devil's Dragons. Dad had it too before they burned his body. Jake's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "He tried to get out when you were born, wanted a clean life for his family. Vincent doesn't let people just walk away." Maya's legs felt weak. Everything she thought she knew about her family, about her father, crumbled around her, but the police report was bought and paid for. "Vincent owns half the cops in this town, Maya. The other half are too scared to cross him. How long have you known?" The question came out as a whisper. "Since I turned 18. Mom told me everything the night before I left for college." Jake ran a hand through his dark hair, the same gesture their father used to make according to their mother's stories. "I was supposed to disappear, start fresh somewhere else with a new identity. But I couldn't leave you, not when Vincent was still breathing." The warehouse door creaked open, and Maya's blood turned to ice. Heavy footsteps echoed across the concrete, accompanied by the jingle of chains and leather. Vincent Kowalski emerged from the shadows, flanked by two other men wearing the familiar leather vests of the Devil's Dragons. "Well, well," Vincent's gravelly voice filled the space. "The Castellano family reunion I've been waiting 17 years for." Maya instinctively moved closer to Jake, who positioned himself between her and the approaching bikers. Vincent was larger than she'd expected, his presence filling the room like a toxic cloud. The dragon tattoo on his massive forearm was faded and scarred, but the eyes of the beast seemed to watch her with malevolent intelligence. "You killed my father," Maya said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Vincent chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Your father killed himself the moment he decided family was more important than brotherhood. I just helped him along. And now you're here to finish what you started," Jake said, his hand moving slowly toward something tucked behind his back. "Smart boy. Though I'll admit I'm impressed you lasted this long." Most people who cross the Dragons don't see their next birthday. Vincent's cold eyes shifted to Maya. But you brought your sister into this, and that complicates things. Maya felt the weight of the recording device in her jacket pocket. Getting Vincent to confess had been Jake's idea, their one chance to bring him down legally. But looking at the man now, seeing the casual way he discussed murder, she realized how naive they'd been. The thing about family loyalty, Vincent continued, is that it makes people predictable. I knew you'd come back for her eventually, just like your father came back for your mother all those years ago. The implication hit Maya like a sledgehammer. Mom, where is she? Vincent smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. Safe, for now. But that depends entirely on how cooperative you two decide to be. Jake's hand found the gun tucked into his waistband. Let her go, Vincent. This is between you and me. No. Vincent shook his head slowly. This is about respect, about consequences. Your father thought he could just walk away from his obligations, start over with a new life. But debts don't disappear just because you change your address. Maya's mind raced. They were trapped, outnumbered, and Vincent held all the cards. But as she watched the man who had destroyed her family gloat over his victory, something cold and hard crystallized in her chest. She thought about her father, about the life he'd tried to build for them, about her mother's years of sacrifice and fear. Some truths were worth killing for, and some people deserved to die. The warehouse district felt like a graveyard at 3 in the morning. Maya crouched behind a rusted shipping container, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the Devil's Disciples clubhouse through night vision binoculars she'd borrowed from her uncle's hunting gear. 6 months of running, hiding, and digging had led to this moment. Inside that concrete fortress, Marcus Vega was holding her brother Danny hostage, using him as bait for the final confrontation. What Vega didn't know was that Maya had spent weeks learning the building's layout from a former member who'd grown disgusted with the club's descent into brutality. Every entrance, every blind spot, every weakness. The tattoo that had started this nightmare, the one she'd innocently described to Vega in that coffee shop, wasn't just any design. It was a map, coordinates burned into Danny's skin during his undercover work for the FBI. The location of every major drug operation, every weapons cache, every dirty cop on the Devil's Disciples payroll. Danny had been gathering evidence for 3 years before his cover was blown. Maya slipped through the chain-link fence, her black clothing helping her blend with the shadows. The first guard was easy. She'd learned that a well-placed rock could create enough distraction to slip past most sentries. The second required more creativity. She waited until he lit a cigarette, then triggered the motion sensor light on the building's far side. As he moved to investigate, she darted through the side entrance. The interior reeked of motor oil and stale beer. Maya followed the building's blueprint in her memory, avoiding the main gathering areas where club members might still be awake. The basement was where they kept prisoners. Her bare feet made no sound on the concrete as she descended the metal stairs. Danny was chained to a pipe in a storage room, his face swollen and bloodied but his eyes alert. When he saw her, fear replaced relief on his battered features. "Maya, no," he whispered as she worked on his restraints with bolt cutters. "It's a trap. Vega knows you're here." The lights blazed on. Marcus Vega stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 club members, all armed. His scarred face wore a satisfied grin. "The Santos family reunion," he drawled. How touching. Maya had expected this. She'd counted on it. "You want the real location of the evidence? Danny only has part of it." Vega's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, girl?" "The tattoo coordinates lead to a safe house, not the evidence itself." Danny's handler knew the risks. "The real files are in 3 separate locations, and I know where they all are." Maya pulled out her phone, showing him photos she'd taken of file folders, carefully staged shots that looked authentic. "My brother could only access 1 cache. I figured out the rest. It was a complete lie, but Vega couldn't afford to ignore the possibility." She watched greed war with suspicion on his face. "Even if that's true," he said slowly, What makes you think I won't just torture it out of you? Because I've already uploaded copies to a secure server with a dead man switch. If I don't check in every 12 hours, everything goes to the FBI, DEA, and every major news outlet in the country. Maya met his stare without flinching. But I'll make you a deal. Let Danny go, and I'll give you 24 hours to disappear before I release the files anyway. Vega laughed, but it sounded forced. You're bluffing, maybe. Are you willing to bet your entire organization on it? The silence stretched taut. Maya could feel Danny's tension beside her, could sense the club members waiting for their leader's decision. Everything hinged on the reputation she'd built over these past months, the girl who'd consistently stayed one step ahead of them, who'd proven more resourceful than anyone expected. Finally, Vega lowered his gun. You've got brass, kid. I'll give you that. He nodded to his men. Let them go. Boss? One of them questioned. You heard me. We're done here. 20 minutes later, Maya and Danny stumbled out of the warehouse district, both shaking from adrenaline and relief. The real FBI backup team that Maya had contacted hours earlier was already moving into position, ready to raid the clubhouse as soon as the siblings were clear. How did you know he'd buy it? Danny asked as they reached the safety of the police checkpoint. Maya smiled grimly. Because men like Vega can't imagine that sometimes the best move is not to play their game at all. He thought he was the hunter, but he was wrong. 6 months later, the Devil's Disciples' leadership was behind bars. The Santos family had new identities and a fresh start 3 states away, and Maya had learned that sometimes the most innocent questions lead to the most dangerous answers, but also to the truth that sets everyone free.